We may go with that one. Okay, that one's got you locked in, and whether or not it'll stay there, I don't know. Walk up on it, yeah, it's following you. This one may be that it just has to be followed all around. So if it is, then we'll just use the 5. The 5 will do it.
Yeah.
I've recorded some real good stuff with 5, and I think I go out there exposing the 5 the way we want. So.
Did you want mainly just the screen?
No, I don't want it on the screen. That was why it was coming out so light.
Oh, okay.
So overexposed because it's exposing on the screen. So you want it to expose on 8 people. You know? In other words, like it could expose like right on me when I'm standing here.
Oh yeah, that's got you. You're good.
Otherwise, if it does it when it's on the screen, it's just going to go real light.
Your keys.
That'll probably be okay. Keys or oh, they're in that okay, so this should be your chapter 2, and your chapter 2 in your books. Your book is a good book. If you have that book, keep it. Don't get rid of that one. A lot of the books you don't keep for long, but that one's a particularly good book because it's something you can use to research from now on. And this is, last week we had contacts, all those different things. I'm going to go over that a little bit. I'll just go real quick. Remember we did encumbrances and we did real property. Okay, so we did estate and real property. Remember some of this? And then we did property real and personal, freehold, non-fixed, fee simple absolute, and then we reverse remainder. That was with the life estates. We did that a little bit. Less than freehold. You can read the handout I gave you or the chapter in the book. Leasehold features and lessor lessee. And then we fortify all that with the test questions. So if you feel like you don't know it, you're right, you don't. You feel confused for about the first couple of weeks in this summer class, you feel real confused, and all of a sudden it starts coming together. It comes together really on the test, the way we use the test. So I go over the test today. We're going to work test question from 21 probably to about 40. And, we'll hone in on that, so you guys know what that is, and then we'll explain each question what it is and why they're asking that. Quiet enjoyment, tenants right and recourses, transfer by lessee, default rental payments types of leases. So you had a lot in that first chapter. And we had, remember, landboarding on water, and that was called littoral rights, and then we had unmined, and we had riparian rights, and then fixtures, trade fixtures, and then we went into our Q&A afterwards. And we did our Q&A in the chapter twice. And your Q&A there's one of the instructors that uses Q&A at the back of the book, which I don't agree with, but he uses it for tests, and then he has you take the test on his Canvas site because it's an easy way, that's a lazy way of doing it. And we don't do it that way. We go through each question, each bloody question. That's where you learn. Just like if I ask you, what's Raven's name? Anybody know?
Raven.
Raven's pretty simple, okay? But if I ask you, name one of the girls on the south side of the classroom in the front row, that makes it more difficult, doesn't it? Right. And that's what questions do. They're meant to trigger what they call critical thinking. Critical thinking, you've got to have information first, what I mean? It's like if I train you to be Marines, which I'm capable of, or I was at one time, if I train you guys to be Marines, I have to teach you to actually shoot at things you're not supposed to shoot at in society. Because somebody's shooting at you, you're going to shoot back at them automatically. You have to be trained to do that. And then I have to remind you when we're there, that's what you're there to do. All right? And that's the same thing when we're learning anything in any class. We've got to know, one, we have the knowledge and when to use it. And that's what we get ready for here. It's a very effective method. And so, without further ado, we go into our chapter 2. And that line is also a poem. And I'll do our poem for today. We have a poem each week. This is Robert Frost. You may have heard his name. He's not a student or anything here. Robert Frost, there's a period in almost all societies that they go through poets and bards, people that kind of advise, like Thoreau and those guys. And we had in our society too, like the Greeks, they had Socrates and that bunch. And then we had in our society, in our American society, we had Thoreau and Emerson and a bunch of those guys were going around in the latter part of the 1700s, early part of the 1800s. They seem to exist for a while and they sort of disappear. And after that, we say, hey, we met our need for philosophers. And this is one that, this guy was a poet, wrote some things, but mostly poetry and that. And what he's writing about here, he's talking about his own environment where he's riding a horse and he's going somewhere and he comes upon somebody's piece of land and it has a wooded area on it. And then he moves it over into life and he says, oh, even though that's those woods seem intriguing and I'd like to go wandering off there, I have to pick a road, the road I'm going to go. And then once I pick that road, I'm sure I'm going to at times look back at the other road. If there's two, I'll look back at the other road and think, maybe I should have gone that way, but then there's no turning back. And so he goes, promises to keep. He says, whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though, so a lot of people live in the village, they have property outside. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flick. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And so what he's saying is, I like to stop and horse around here in the woods, as you would a lot of times in life. There's things you'd like to do, mess around with doing it, but you have miles to go before you have time for that. Good one. All right, so that guy got famous, then I don't know what happened to him. He lived like a recluse in the woods, I don't know. Okay, from the beginning. Let's see what else I can change it for. All right, so this is our chapter 2. Now, you may have caught on already, we'll go about 2 days on a chapter. It's going fast, all right? And then I'll tell you what you need to remember. And by the time we get to the 3rd or 4th chapter, if you're going, I don't remember what's on the first one, not important. I'll tell you what I need you to remember, all right? And then we'll get through and get it done. Ownership and transfer of real estate. Now, we're talking about real estate in the first class. Now we're talking about the ownership of it and the transfer of it. Sole or separate ownership. So if we have sole and separate property, we're going to call that severality. So if somebody owns a piece of property for testing, that's severality. In the office, we're going to say sole and separate. That's what we always say in the office. So we don't say that again until we get back to our broker's test. So now we go severality. That means you own the property by yourself. You and I are married and you want to own a piece of property by yourself. Can you own it? Yes. How are you going to own title? As separate property. That's for test purposes. In the actual world of real estate today, we say it would be her sole and separate property. Right? Severality. And then these are co-ownerships. Now that was how you hold property one person by themselves. Now we go to co-ownership. Co-ownership property is owned by more than one person or entity and may be in one of the following forms. It could be a joint tenancy. We don't know what that is yet. It could be tenants in common. It could be community property, and it can be community property with survivorship. So we have basically 4 types of co-ownership. we have one type of singular ownership, or one type of one owner, okay? Joint tenancy. Now, they're going to ask you a lot of questions about joint tenancy. So we need to know a lot about joint tenancy. Joint tenancy is a method of holding ownership so that if Raven and I hold a piece of property in joint tenancy, we don't have to be married or anything like that, but if we hold a piece of property in joint tenancy, the first person that dies, then their half goes to the other person. Okay? If there's three of us, I don't know your name.
Yesenia.
What?
Yesenia.
Yesenia? Yesenia?
Yesi.
Jesse? Okay, Jesse and Ray. Huh?
Yes.
Yessie, like Yesenia, but Yessie. Okay. Yessie. Yessie and Raven, I want to change owners. Yessie and Raven and I own a piece of property in joint tenancy. So joint tenancy, the main thing there is a right of survivorship. And so then I die. Then they inherit my half. Now they each own one half. Then Yessie dies because she's got a hard name. Now everything goes to Raven. Now, Raven owns the whole thing. And there's reasons in business to do it that way. A lot of times people hold it that way, like children, or the parents want the children to hold a joint tenancy because they don't have the right of survivorship, okay? So let's write something up here on the board. It'll be, I think, on the next slide. But let's write it here on the board because I want you to remember it. If I can find something to write with. We're going to write tip. That's an I. And it says time, title, interest, let me make a good eye out of that, and possession. Can y'all see that? Is it hard for this side of the room? There you go. Time, title, interest, possession. Anytime you see joint tenancy, I want you to write T-tip down. So that means that it has to be created at the same time. It has to have the same interest, or it has to be on the same title. Title, be on the same grant deed. And then it has to have the same interest. So like with the three of us had it had to be 1/3 each. When it was just Raven and I, it'd be 50-50. If there was four of us, each person would have 25%. All right? And then possession. And possession most nearly means that this is a piece of property and the three of us own it. We own it equally, and the right of possession has to do with what part do we own. We don't. We own equally this whole thing, so that if Yessie wants to come up here and she says, this is my 1/3 here. No, it's not. She owns 1/3 of the whole thing. She owns 1/3 of the whole thing, and I own 1/3 of the whole thing. So possession there is not like when we're renting something, somebody could be renting it too. But the possession there is we have equal possession. I don't say I have the first 25 feet of that lot, and I don't want you guys there. Okay? Time, title, interest, and possession. All right? When one person, something happens to one person, they die, and that people inherit it. One of the things can be done that, and this is a question on your state test, one of the things can be done with joint tenancy interest is you could sell your interest. You know, you could sell your interest, and that would break the joint tenancy. Okay? It would break the joint tenancy. How are you guys going to run into this? What's it going to mean to you in the real estate office? In the real estate office, you're going to be selling homes to kids that are thinking about getting married, and but they're not married yet. And so then you're going to sell them a home, and probably you're going to have it in joint tenancy. That way, if something happened to either one of them, go to the other one. And then when they get married, you're going to remind them, it's another time for you to contact them. When they get married, you're going to change it over to community property. That's husband and wife as community property. There are some tax benefits in that. Okay, it's better for them to hold as community property. All right. We'll talk about that in this chapter. To a greater extent. Okay, so we got eliminates probate, escapes the debts of the other. Now this is one of the things about it. It's used a lot for business. So, like say Starlin and I had a piece of property that has joint tenants, and Starlin dies. I do die all the time. Starlin dies, And so then I would inherit everything from Starlin. It would be mine. There would be no probate. We would simply record the notice of death of a joint tenant. We'd have to have a death certificate to go with it. And we would record that, and when we recorded that, that would take care of it. Then it would just automatically go right into my name. The real benefit of joint tenancy is the remaining interest on the death of a joint tenant automatically goes to the remaining tenant or tenants. Joint tenancy escapes other debts. Now let's say that Starlin went out and got a 13-year-old girlfriend. And spent all kinds of money and bought all kinds of silly things and had all these debts. Then he died. Normally, people that he owes money to could levy a lien against property owners, right? Not in joint tenancy. Not in joint tenancy. The only time there's going to be an encumbrance on joint tenancy is when he and I together go out and get a loan. But it never ever serves for the debts of the other joint tenants. So that those debts that he owes because of the little girlfriend. She was a cute little kid. I didn't. Okay. 4 units get joint tenancy. 4 units are time, title, interest, and possession. We already said that up on the board. All parties must acquire or come into title at the same time. All parties must be named in the same document. And the interest, each owner must have an equal interest. Can't be 1/3, 1/4 like that. It has to be 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, 1/2, 1/2. Interest, each owner must have an equal interest, and possession. Each co-owner has equal right of possession. You start to understand that possession thing. Possession, as you think of it, is it's my apartment, don't come in here, and that's not possession in law. Possession in law means when you're owning things, means you know what rights you have into what part. Like if you and I own a car together, you don't own the back seat and I own the front seat. We own the whole thing equally, all right? Car might be a better example. So time, title, interest, and possession. Well, what do you do? What would happen? We'll go through this a little bit again more. This has to be hammered into your heads. You don't remember automatically. Gradually, as we get to the end, because the question you will at the end of the class and after the 6 weeks. What would happen if? And I already told you this. Okay, Raven and I get married, but I mean, we want to get married. We buy a house first, and so we take it as joint tenants, right? And then after we get married, I said we're going to change it to community property, which tells you that if you already own something, the two of us already own something, that we can then go to the escrow and change the vesting of a holding. So what would happen if we own property? Let's just say we own property as tenants in common. We haven't covered that yet. But let's say we own property as tenants in common. We decided we wanted to change it to joint tenancy. When do we run into that kind of thing? Well, a lot of times your parents decide they're getting older and they say, you know, we want you to inherit this when we die. I heard there's some way we can do it, that we can put into some kind of a holding and it'll automatically go over you. Usually we use trust now, but they could do it with a joint tenancy, could they? Put you on as a joint tenant, won't change anything. So they put you on as a joint tenant and then they die. And the presumption is they're going to die first. That's where you're throwing the dice. Now you don't know who's really going to die first. But the presumption is that they're going to die first, and when they die, then you own the whole thing. And their debts will not be incurred, you know, on that property, which is a good thing as long as they die in a timely fashion. Sometimes I have to take them to the dying class. How to die when you're supposed to die. You know? The thing is that if, you know, that in life planning, that oftentimes you think, well, I'll leave this to my kids, you know, and you think your kids is outliving you, and they don't. You know, and when they don't, you know, you have to make arrangements. We use trust, which I don't cover in this class at all. We do cover trust in the program, but not in this class. Okay. So title, all parties must be named in the same document. So now how would I change it now? Raven and I are on as community property, and we decided it'd be better if we were on as joint tenants. For some reason, we just go to the escrow company and Rob and Raven, deed to Rob and Raven as joint tenants. So now we were on this community property, Rob and Raven, husband and wife, as community property, deed to Rob and Raven as joint tenancy property. So you just change the vesting. Once it's a matter of record, and it should be recorded, it doesn't have to be recorded, but it should be. Once it's recorded, then that makes the difference. Okay? Let's change that vesting. And then for tax purposes, why we would be doing that. All parties must be named in the same document. Interest, each co-owner must have an equal interest. There can be 10 of us, in joint tenancy. There can be 2 of us. It has to be more than one. Okay, so maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, however many you want. But everybody has to be on the same document. Everybody has to have the same interest. Each co-owner has to have equal possession. That doesn't mean they all live there. It simply means that the interests are not segregated. Owner 1 owns the front half, and owner 2 owns the back half. Survivorship, the main characteristic of joint tenancy. This is a question on your test. Your author in this book tends to write to the test. So he's going to say the main thing, they have a question on the state test, the main thing about joint tenancy is survivorship. So survivorship is the main characteristic of joint tenancy is that the right of survivorship exists regardless. If one of the owners wills his interest to someone, the act of willing would have no effect on it. Grant deed or transfer documents should name the parties as joint tenants. Rob and Raven as joint tenants. Okay? Now let's say we're married and we have a joint tenancy property, and then I get a 13-year-old girlfriend. It's the one he used to have, but he died. Okay, then, and I'm telling her, I love you, I will will this property to you. If something happens to me, and I will her a joint tenancy property. And then I die. Does she inherit anything?
No.
It's not willable, is it? I can write in a will, I can put it there, but it can't be willed because it's joint tenancy. Community property, that's not true, and there's some reasons for it. But joint tenancy, no. We have some problems with it. I think we're kind of through them now, but tenancy in common. Now, tenancy in common is something. One of the things I always want you kids to do is own 3 or 4 fourplexes because it will create a retirement living for you that's second to none. You have to keep the rents up. You've got to be honest with your tenants and raise their rents where they should be. And I get a bunch of bums in there at low rents, but the thing is, you would have the equivalent if you get like 4 fourplex, and we did this the other day. You would have the equivalent retirement income of around $20,000 to $25,000 a month. That's pretty good. Anybody here would want to turn down $20,000 to $25,000 a month? Whoever wants to turn that down, please raise your hands. Come up the front row. No? Well, maybe there's an advantage. You wouldn't have to pay taxes. Paying taxes is a good thing, is it? Yeah, it tells you you're making money, does it? It does, doesn't it? You say, I have a $50,000 tax bill, then you know for sure you made over $50,000. So taxes are not a bad thing. They're kind of an indicator of how successful you may or may not be. Okay, tenancy in common ownership of 2 or more persons with an undivided but not necessarily equal interest. So let's say we all went out in here, and there's about 15 of us in here today. We all went out and we bought a 10-unit apartment building. And Raven's in it for 10%, I'm in it for 5%, Yessie's in it for